We're here to talk about plugins, but first, who are we? My name is Brent. I'm an engineered astronomer.
Hey, my name is Pierre. I am also a software engineer at Astronomer and a committer and PMC member of the Apache Airflow project.
And I'm Jens. I'm not astronomer, but mainly first-time beta user of the plugin interface. And yeah, let's go.
Okay, guys, so we're going to cover how to extend the API and UI in this session today. Then we're going to deep dive into a more complex use case, the edge provider, and finally we have a discussion and Q&A at the end. Hopefully a little bit longer than other sessions because we really want to hear your use cases as well as the improvement and features that you would like to see added in upcoming Airflow versions. To put back the context, for Airflow 3, we rebuilt entirely the API and the UI with React and Fast API. We wanted to leverage those modern frameworks to bring new capabilities to the plugin system. And of course, we wanted to still be able to support legacy plugins in Airflow 3. This is achieved via the fab provider, and this is not a blocker to upgrade. For the backend, you have two ways to extend the API server, fast API sub-applications, and middlewares. Both of them are mounted on the root level of the API server apps. You will see in a minute that this is an important piece of information.
We'll do the API first, but also we have a whole bunch of different ways to plug into the UI. And so that will be external links, we'll have embedded iframes, and then we'll have fully fledged React apps, if you all remember from the keynote.
So let's jump into the demo. So Fast API sub-application, this is how you can add endpoints to your API server. Those can be REST endpoints, static file serving, for instance, if you want to host a website. Basically, anything that is supported by Fast API applications will work. Here you just have a very simple Fast API application. This has nothing specific about Airflow. This could be an application that lives in your code base or something you create specifically for Airflow. Then you just have to register it into the plugin system. Similarly to Airflow 2, you just need to subclass the Airflow plugin class, and you initialize the class attributes that you want for your use case. In this specific case, we initialize the Fast API apps, and you give an instance of your application as well as some metadata. The URL prefix here will be the prefix for all of your endpoints, and you can give a name and some extra information if you want. So this is Airflow UI. You can see that you can reach the endpoint with the URL prefix and the path that we provided when we created the endpoint. This is a very simple example, but most likely you want to add some root dependencies, permission checks, and business logic. All of that is possible and contained in your application code. The second way to extend the API server is to use Fast API root middlewares. The most probable use case for this is if you want to do some extra processing before or after requests, such as update the content or modify headers of your requests. Those are registered at the top level of the application of the API server, meaning that you will be able to plug into all the API server requests and responses, including core ones. This is a super flexible feature, but be careful because with great power comes great responsibilities. And here you could break some core APIs if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. In the following example, we just implement a custom Fast API middleware. There are multiple ways on how to achieve this. And in this example, we extend the base HTTP middleware. This is a simple one that we just check the URL that we access, and if we are accessing the home page of the UI, we will inject a custom script that will create a window alert. And if it's not the home page, we just don't do anything. So this will just modify the response content. And as you can see, this is a core endpoint. So similarly to the Fast API sub-application, you also have a dedicated attribute here, the Fast API root middleware. There you provide your factory object and some metadata. Just to mention that, as you can see, we don't provide an instance of the middleware, but a factory object. There are reasons for this, but I won't go into details. And to see this in a demo, here we are on the DAX page. If we refresh, nothing happens. And if we go over to the dashboard page, then the middleware will kick in and create an alert. Now, Brent, if you want to show the...
Cool. So that was all of the Fast API plugins. A lot of that, if you're familiar with Airflow 2 world, is probably a lot of things that the Flask Blueprint plugins would do. Now we're going to go into the UI plugins, which is a lot more you can do now. So the first one we're going to talk about our iframe plugins. We just found that a lot of use cases where people just wanted to show the documentation from something else in Airflow to have a quick link over. So here is like all of the metadata to register that plugin. We start off with a name of it. Then we have the href, so the actual link, and we can do like pattern matching on that. So if you pass in DAG ID, run ID, task ID, map index, we'll fill that in if it's on like that appropriate page. If you're having it on the DAG page, we'll put the DAG ID in so you can see, have an iframe for that DAG ID's resources, wherever that might be. We'll talk more about destination and everything else. We also have some icons of like where this all should live. We'll go into more details about each of these later. But once you create that object, you just simply pass it as external views. Like that is what tells it will be an iframe. And here we'll go into it. And we see in the plugins menu here, since we have a lot of plugins, it overflows into plugins. Do top level, and we click on that, and we have the Airflow docs inside of Airflow without having to open another tab. The next one we have are external links. Really, this is just the exact same thing as if you used plugins before, the App Builder menu item plugin. So instead of it opening in an iframe, it just opens you in a link somewhere else. Pretty simple. You see the little like external link icon, and that will open, let's say, your Airflow docs just in another tab. A cool thing we've added to this all, though, is going through all of those like ways to configure it were categories on the nav bar. So if the destination, which we'll kind of talk a little bit more about, there's many places a plugin can exist. If it's on the nav bar, there's also different categories that it can exist on. So if it is an app builder menu, if it was in Airflow 2 world, an app builder menu item, like, okay, which menu on that nav bar do you want to be? You can create a brand new one, or you can attach to an existing one. So if the name matches docs, we'll add it to the docs menu. If it's in admin, you're creating a new custom admin view. So we can also quickly demo that. So in this case, here's all the ones that are under plugins, but we can also create a menu underneath that for DBT and, just brand new categories. So it can be sub-menus, but also append onto existing menus that we have here. So then the much more powerful plugin of all of this is React Apps, which I'm going to say is in experimental mode as of 3.1. There's a few more things we want to stabilize, particularly around how dependencies are managed between the main React UI and the plugin you're creating. And so again, we'll come back to this. And instead of having an href that we had for the iframes, you're having a bundle URL. So it's like a compiled JavaScript file is ultimately what your plugin needs to be. And it can be hosted. You can host it yourself, or you can actually create a Fast API plugin to host that static file within Airflow. So again, now once you register that, we have a React app with all the metadata that had existed for just like the external view, or just like the iframe views, external views. And we can show that here with, which one is it? Yeah, the template React app. Click on it. And now full page, we will have your, like a full React app happening. So yeah. And then another part of the metadata I wanted to go into, so we talked about the categories, were destinations. And this is a lot more, this is for those iframes, for those React apps, of where do you want it to live? So is it that nav bar we were just talking about? Is it in the dashboard itself? So if we went back to the previous example here, we see like it also says, welcome to your new React app on the top. You can add it to the dashboard, pass an order to it of like, do I want it at the beginning? Do I want it at the third element in there to help you customize your own dashboard page to what you need? And then we also have the ability to add it into specifically your DAG page or a task instance page. And that's when we do that matching to, for an iframe, match it to the URL, or in a React app, we're going to send those as props that you can directly use in your component. Trying to remember which one we have here. So we have the top level here showing you that you have like either React app, you can put it at the top, at the bottom, we can put ones in there. We also have the state shared in terms of the dark mode on this one. And yeah, we have so many examples, videos here. I don't know if Pierre, you want to take some of these because I don't remember them all.
This one. Okay, this one will display a React application directly into the details tab here on the right. And it's very similar to the other example we've shown you, just to display that we can target specific locations. And so basically we can propagate the task instance ID, DAG ID, and DAG1 ID to the React application directly. So the React app will have some context of where it's being rendered and can use this to do some specific processing. So here, if you wait, there we can see that we passed the DAG ID, and if we go on integrating to the task instance or DAG1, we will have additional piece of information here.
And then, yeah, we just want to give a shout out that someone even did add Doom as an iframe plugin to Airflow. So just quite a lot of fun. But I'm going to pass it over to Jens now to like a real world use case. Instead of just playing Doom, instead of just having a button that shows up, how can we really use plugins?
Yeah, and being Airflow member, kind of as a first-class citizen, our aim was in Airflow 3.1 to take that opportunity and integrate the Edge executor natively into the UI, even though it's a plugin, a provider package, but yeah, using eat your own dog food, you would say. And I want to just summarize up what the learnings are. And kind of to say kind of how we went down the route. So you saw all the examples. It's a bit complex where you can plug in all the pieces, and there are a lot of options. Can be confusing. So for the Edge executor, we now made a native React plugin to see how we can deeply integrate and also to learn how stable the interface is and where the glitches are. So what we did, and there's a PR as a reference if you want to read through the code and maybe take that as an example. We started with, there's a bootstrap tool. So whenever you start a plugin, start with the bootstrap tool. Otherwise, you are having a hairy lot of config files to make it working. But the bootstrap tool will help you with setting up the dependencies in the environment. And then kind of we touched all the details, but also for the Edge executor, we went through all the steps necessary. So we registered the React apps and the Fast API apps because we didn't want to just publish a static content, but the React app should interact with the backend. We want to see the workers that are running, and we want to see the jobs running, and that should live update. So we need to have API endpoints exposing the data. We need to mount in the static assets because the React app somehow need to be downloaded and be hosted, and we want to host that with the provider package. So as soon as you install the provider, the assets should be there, and it should just open without hosting another web endpoint. And content type, we will come to this in a detail. Yeah, and also to say the API routes needed to be added so that the plugin finds the endpoints and gets the output out. Yeah, and also the content needed to be created beside all the plugin foo for integrating. Also, the pages itself need to be rendered. Yeah, as per the documentation in the repo, there's a bootstrap tool, and we maintain it with every Airflow version that you can use. You start this with a Python command line, and you give it a parameter how and where your plugin should be dropped. And you see a bit of a file list, what artifacts it actually creates. And that's a kind of the React example you saw on the previous slides. This is what the bootstrap generates. It generates an empty page with the toggle, the dark and light mode button, and then you can get started. I don't go through all the details of those generated files. It's something that you can maybe do as your homework if you're interested. Once this boilerplate code is being generated, as of the examples before, I created the plugin class as a derivative from the Airflow plugin base class, and in there, depending on the Airflow version, the React wrap was registered, and kind of in this case here we see only if the edge executor is active. That's a constant defined upper level in the code, and if it's on the API server, because we don't want to expose that on a scheduler or DAG parser, then it registers this in the plugin. It generates the API endpoint so that the API services are being hosted for getting the service, and the React app is mounted in the plugin so that the resources can be found and loaded into the browser with the dedicated route. Also, like kind of icon and where it is showing in the navbar. We will see later. Looking one level deeper into the fast API services, and kind of we have one server service for the worker. Kind of whenever an edge worker comes up, the edge worker need to register, and once the worker is registered on the web UI, we want to list the workers. So we added an API route as an example here for the worker, and that is kind of retrieving the lists of edge workers being available to be displayed then on the UI. And this then implements the fast API backend, kind of it queries the worker table and then generates a pedantic model out of this so that fast API can render the JSON output. In this kind of, I saw very much often also in the legacy Airflow 2 world, when people started writing a plugin, don't forget the authentication. Otherwise, if you expose the root, it's not protected per default. If you open the root and you forget about the user authentication dependency, you open up your URL root to the public internet, and everybody on the World Wide Web can play with that if you expose the endpoint. So here you can import the some utility libraries from the Airflow core that will help you then manage your access credentials. Yeah, and the outcome is here a fully integrated view. We've shown it in the keynote and in the detailed sessions. So kind of the plugin is rendered natively. You can use pop-ups, you can refresh the list. And also what was included here is that the web service bindings are generated with Axios. Kind of, we also use the tooling in the core framework. On one side, on the backend, we create the API endpoints, and then with Axios, we create the client binding code with the API generator so that we can natively in TypeScript use directly the refresh and the services without a lot of manual effort. Some learnings out of this, and kind of also we learned as the contributor team for making the plugin system working. It is kind of the outcome basically is we marked it as experimental because we saw we have some breaking pieces and we need to learn and stabilize the interface. So key learning is you should use, if you roll your own plugin, use the Bootstrap tool, as I said already. Otherwise, you'll get hairy details until everything is running. The improvement is for the future that we saw we have a lot of shared components like tabs, buttons, dialogues, where in the Airflow core we have components which in a plugin you probably don't want to run a greenfield re-implementation of all the buttons, lists, and whatever you have in UI elements. So probably we will think about how we can make those components shareable, that a plugin can utilize the table layouts, dialogues, state buttons, so for the initial version of the Edge Executor plugin, I needed to copy and paste a lot of code of components into the plugin, which are maintained on other sides of the code. That shouldn't be the long-term solution. Yeah, the dev-env also needs improvement. Kind of, if you use Breeze, you can start a dev mode, and that is pretty cool to online develop in the Airflow core. But it's at the moment a bit hairy and not working with the plugins because the Vite server takes care for the Airflow core, but not for the plugin code. And otherwise, if you run the plugin in Vite, that is possible. Then you have problems that running your plugin standalone without the core surrounding of the Airflow core, then you are missing your backend to query with the web services. So that need to be maybe merged together, that there's a better development experience. Today, the workaround is you need to statically compile the assets and then run the Airflow core with Breeze, and then you can test. And if that fails, then you run over and shut down the server, restart it, rebuild it, and that need to be improved. But still, I would say it's working. It's a bit tedious, but you can make your plugin running. So at the moment it's a bit static. That need to be improved. We saw that there are fixes for internal links, kind of in the menu navbar. Usually in the core you want to navigate without a page refresh. We saw there's a limitation in 3.10. Hopefully we will fix it up in 3.11 in the next patch. So efforts are ongoing that you can also have not only a navigation from outside into your plugin, but from the plugin you probably also want to interact with the rest of the Airflow web UI. So if you want to render a link to a DAG and you want to have a link out going to another position, this needs to have a bit of fixes in the next Airflow patch. Also, toasters and pop-ups, we need to figure out why they're not showing up. So somehow everywhere in the Airflow core they're working, but if you open a plugin, the toasters are not showing up. And we have a bit of tight coupling where we need to figure out how we find a long-term strategy if we bump the React versions of some packages, that we loosen the interdependency between React plugins. So a couple of reasons why this is experimental. It should not stop you in maybe getting started and roll your own plugin, but be expected that you probably need to rebuild it for the next time when new Airflow versions are coming out to ensure your plugin code is working.